That's fine.
And we got some information off of me, or something like that, but I don't know.
I think
Take
that.
whatever you want.
That'll work. I think we're both in that. There you go.
Okay, you
Okay.
ready?
Yes, sir. So starting with McClanahan.
Okay.
Okay.
His name is Thurl, T-R, they used to call him short name, Thurl McClanahan.
Bill McClanahan.
He was a first degree black in judo.
Okay.
His top student was John Piscazzi. He's one of his judo instructors. I stopped in there when I got back to this country looking for, not what I wanted to run into, but at least I was looking for something. All right, so I went to judo school, which was about 1952 or something like that. And I had trained in Japan. After fighting was done in the South Pacific, I was in on the Philippine, well, you could call it just about anything, but the Philippine Liberation is what they called it.
Okay.
And I fought in Leyte and Luzon. When the peace treaty was finally signed, General MacArthur sent 3 divisions into Japan quickly, within a few days. Now, you got to figure a division is 10,000 fighting men plus all their backup, okay? One was the 1st Cavalry Division, which went into Tokyo. The second one was down in Yokohama, which was the 11th Airborne Division, which I was a member of. And the Marines went down to Yokosuka Naval Base, south of Yokohama. All right, after I was there a while, I got sent to a school to try to pick up at least a working knowledge of Japanese language. At this school, which was held in Sophia University in, it could be in either Tokyo or Yokohama. There wasn't much left then. We burnt the whole fucking country down to the ground. And while there, one of the instructors there, who could speak fluent English, got to talking one time, and he talked about karate. And that's what they call it, karate, or whatever they wanted to call it. And I asked, what is it? He said, it's a form of martial arts. Well, I know what martial means. It means military. And so I says, well, they got a place where they teach it at? Yes, there's a guy that runs a school with a couple of branches that are not very big. His name is Masoyama. And the one they said could kill with one blow and kill a bull. He could. All right, and the bull wasn't tied up or anything.
Yeah, I've heard stories.
But the man wasn't the average Japanese. This guy was 6 foot tall, over 200 pounds, and he had a hand that looked like a fucking foot. All right? I mean, he had knuckles that came up, and we were required, once I started training there, to hit the makiwara board for almost a half an hour before class. And then they started. Now, the fact that I was a Caucasian, I wasn't accepted too well. And they free played, but they made contact. And they were all trying to kill my fucking ass. And so I'm trying to get along with these people. So the instructor, who came from Masoyama, told me, he says, you know how to fight? I says, well, I know some. He says, well, then you better start fighting. These guys are going to figure out a way to put you away. And so I did. And I said, just teach me what you know, and I'll kick your ass. And so they started teaching me then. In free play, and I got to the point where they couldn't beat me. Then after about 2.5 years, I had to go back to the United States. I'd been overseas too long, never had any kind of a leave. So I took that. I said I re-enlisted though before I left. I wanted to come back.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not real good with this stuff. I didn't. There we go.
All right, I came back to the United States. Nobody ever heard of karate anywhere in America in 1949. And so that's where I went looking, and I found the judo school in Akron by Thurl. And I told him, I says, you teach me judo, I'll teach you karate. There were only about 2 or 3 forms back in about the time of karate. And the style of karate was Goju, which is Okinawan. And Master Oyama was in charge of it. That was his baby. Another guy who started something different, which started a hell of a, I don't know, vendetta between the two of them, was called Yamaguchi. And Yamaguchi had a name of the cat. He was about less than 5 foot high, real long hair.
I was going to say, didn't he have long white hair?
Danced around and all this shit. And so he called it Goju-Ryu. Well, all that meant in Japanese was it's the same thing. Goju-Ryu meant there was a combination of softer and the hard style. And that started the vendetta. Then I came back and I started teaching in Thurl School. And before I left Japan, I was told by Oyama that what little we know about the martial arts we got from the Chinese. And they forgot to teach us 99% of it.
So you met Masayama personally?
Oh, yeah. More than one time.
I'm very envious. You have met a lot of historical figures.
So, anyway, he told me, he said, if you can find a real Chinese teacher, come on in, George. Just try the guy will teach you, jump on it. And so luckily after about a year or so I did. So I found somebody, so I started. All right, and it didn't take me long to find out that there were some people on this continent that had been well trained in Chinese.
And you said you met the Shy brothers there, James and Eugene.
Here, yeah. They were good people.
I personally took from
teaching
Eugene.
in Thurl School. They stopped over to see who the hell I was, and they met me and they watched me teaching a class or something. They come up, introduced themselves, we shook hands, and were friends thereafter.
Good.
But anyway, once I got somebody that could start teaching me, I did. Well, after I'd been taught for about a year and a half, 2 years, 2 guys came into this area, and they were the pathfinders of commercial martial arts training. All right, and this is still in their early 50s. And so they got a place and started it. They had to come to Thurl School to find instructors. The only one anywhere near in the country, as far as we knew, that knew anything about karate was me. And so he took me, they took me and John Piscasi over to this place. They were signing up these people on contracts and then selling the contracts to the bank. Okay, so it's a legitimate way, all right? The problem was, Thurl McClanahan worked for what they called the dime bank back then. He was a loan officer, and he was the one that was taking all that paper in and giving them the money for it. And so they got to thinking, well, we need something that looks legitimate, which is along comes Freeman on. He finished high school at Barberton after he came to this country. His godfather owned Sam Sain's Laundry in Barberton, so he was working there. And so once he got out of school, he had to put the 6 months back in the full army, then he had to pay, I forget how much time after that, in the reserves, all right? And I had met him then when they brought him over to the place the first time. What they wanted was somebody with yellow skin and slanted eyes walking around that give legitimacy to me and Piscazzi, like he was our teacher or something. This guy had never had a fucking lesson in his life. Right? He was 15 when he got here in this country, and he never got a lesson in Hong Kong. All right, then they started feeding him shit, and he says, you know, well, he was a Shaolin monk. And I just looked at Piscazzi and I said, there hasn't been a Shaolin temple in almost 300 fucking years. What the hell is he talking about? So we figured out what he was. He was just another con artist. Just bullshit is all it was. And they got along and they really built up this commercial venture. I don't know how many contracts they signed. I don't have any idea. Nobody else had ever thought of it in this country. These guys did, they were promoters.
What were they calling, were they calling it karate or kung fu? Or?
I don't know what the hell they called it. All right, they paid me $100 a week back then, and they paid Piscazzi $100 a week, and I think they probably did the same thing to Freeman.
Didn't you say they called it Kempo at that time?
They were calling it all kinds of bullshit. They lied so much because they were all con artists. They were nothing but promoters. And so then, when the venture went through, of course, Thurl lost his job at the Dime Bank. They got took for a lot of goddamn money. These people didn't want to pay their contracts. And so, well, what are you going to do if you own the company? You're going to kick his ass out, all right? Because he was responsible for all this shit. And he'd been working there for quite a while, I guess. So anyway, they decided to start teaching after these bums left themselves, two guys. And they started on the bowling alley on Waterloo Road just before you get to Main Street. There was a big room they used in there, they rented out.
Okay.
They brought mats in there, and after we got out of work, me and John would go over there and practice and teach stuff, and people would come up from the bowling alley and watch and all that. And one day, an Akron cop came in, and he wasn't nasty or anything. He said, well, any of that shit work, you know, if the guy's got a gun out and pointed at you? I says, yeah, probably. So he was one of the Conley brothers. They're infamous in the police department.
Mm-hmm.
And so he emptied his revolver, which is all they carried back in. And he stood in front of me and pulled the gun out. And I forget who counted, and on the count of two, he was to, you know, pull his gun out of the holster, you know, pull the hammer back and shoot me. And before, as soon as he got it out, I used a crescent kick, caught him in the wrist, and kicked his gun all the way across the goddamn room. And so he didn't get to shoot me. And I met him and his brothers after that. I was in law enforcement, so. And so we decided, Beeman then said, fuck these guys. He's going to start his own. So he did. So he got one of the guys that we were training that was a contractor who bought a house on Copley Road, and it was empty. And he turned that into sort of like a school. And me and John would go there to teach. And
Bob Keene?
What?
Bob Keene? Was it his house? The house. Was
Yeah.
it Bob Keene's house?
Bob Keene was a student at Thurl McClanahan School. He was a brown belt in judo.
Okay.
All right, I taught Bob.
Because I heard that some of the Kwan Yin Do stuff started in somebody's basement. I heard Bob Keene or Keenan and Steve Ong teach in Keene's basement. Is that,
Well, he
did I say
believed-
Well,
right?
they used to teach in Feeman Ong's
He
basement.
believed all the shit Feeman was saying, to a point. But we were friends, so I knew him for a long time before we ever met Feeman. And so Feeman started.
Well, who got the house that you were talking about down in the basement?
Yeah, I don't know, and I can't even remember the name of the guy that bought the place, he was a contractor, he built homes and this and that and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And, I really don't know. I could take you right to the house today on top of the road. And, of course, I know it isn't the same or anything like that.
Right.
And so I just said, hey, fuck it, what am I gonna teach for this asshole? And he don't know a goddamn thing. And so I started my own school. I started teaching when I was still on the sheriff department in Portage County.
Where was your first school?
And
Where was your first school?
first school
Where was it located?
actually in a building in Ravenna.
In Ravenna.
It was up on the second or third floor. Guy was using it. He was, Thurl McClanahan was teaching a class up there in judo. And I came in and kicked him out and took over. Which isn't a nice thing to do.
That seems to have
And,
happened back in the 50s and 60s.
So then I got hired away from Portage County and came down to Mogador Police Department and I started a school there.
And that was your second school?
You know, it was up on top of the pizza parlor or whatever it was. And I had about, I don't know, I got pictures of the first 6 or 7. And I started teaching there. And then the old church building that the JCs were renting for the kids to have something to do on Friday nights and stuff like that to keep them out of trouble. They had music in there, they hired local bands, which would make you sick listening to their fucking music. And kids were coming over from Ellett and starting trouble. And so they hired a Mogador policeman who was worthless as a hind tig on a boar hog. And he couldn't stop nothing. I mean, he'd get anybody over 5 foot, he had to have backup. And he was about 6'3" or something like that. And so the consul, they wanted to shut the place down. They called it the Cat's Cage. And they asked him, what if we got a different person, you know, to watch over? I mean, not different policemen, you know, who do you